Okay. What is your big takeaway from this episode?
There's a lot that happened in this episode.
There is.
Overall, visually, it was very beautiful from the planets. I feel like we didn't talk about it too much throughout this episode, but the planets and then the nebula. Oh, like when the ship was flying through the nebula. Oh, man, it was some good spaceport.
Absolutely.
Even seeing, like, I think it's New York City, right? Where the Union
I believe so.
But just like, I love seeing future cities so much. And you could see like the establishing shots where you can see the outside and how the roadways work. And I really enjoyed all of that. So again, just the episodes look really good. And there's always at least one view in every episode that I'm just like, oh my gosh, did you see how pretty that is? And in this one, there were several.
Yeah.
I feel like the last part of this episode was my favorite. So like that last 10-minute chunk kind of had the biggest impact on me. I feel like what I kind of needed from this episode.
Totally.
I thought it was shocking that the Mocklins were being removed from the Union. And so now that we're down the Krill and the Mocklins, and there's this big threat about Kalons, just going to say, I wonder where that's going to lead. Just makes you think, uh-oh.
Setting the stage for something here.
Oof. Yeah, so just thinking about how we're going down the big powerhouses that help kind of beef up Union security and safety. We're down 2. I don't know much else. Are there any others that they really talk about? That,
None come to mind.
So I'm very curious what that's going to mean. And we have 2 episodes left. So I have a lot of fear about what that's going to mean later on. I thought it was odd what they did with Havina this episode. I felt like it kind of discredited her and her wisdom a little bit. I know it's obviously that she doesn't know how to do everything perfectly, but I feel like it kind of dissolved this aura that I had built around her and like the mysticism of Havina. So it's obviously really short-sighted for her to bring a child into this, but I can see where the episode is trying to dive into that moral, philosophical question of doing something questionable for the greater good, seeing an opportunity and just saying like, I got to try this. I think Havina was in the wrong. She should not have asked Topa. And I think that she has enough wherewithal and wisdom and knowledge to have found another way. So I feel like it kind of did a disservice to Havina, but it also humanized her a bit. So I don't know if that was the intention. And
I understand that.
Yeah. The Kelly Borda ship is maybe sailing, but also there were some vibes between the two of them. However, Clyden is back, so we're going to have to see where the cookie crumbles because I don't know what can really grow from that. I did not see it coming, but I'm kind of here to see where it goes. I'm very curious what they're going to do with that because I don't think they would just pop that in here to just like, okay, you guys got this now. It's just Clyden's back. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to evolve into.
I'll let you enjoy that.
Okay, I will. Like I love Clyden. Like I love that Clyden's back and that Clyden had this growth and realization about, oh, I've been really awful and I almost lost you. And that it took that for me to realize what's important and that this is not who I am as a person. So I really respect that. But sometimes I also think it's like too little too late. I'm glad that Clyden's back. I'm just very curious because I feel like there's a lot there that can happen between Bordas and Clyden. And I don't feel like Kelly's gonna, like, I don't see an affair situation happening.
I guess my big thought on it is I still don't understand why they did it if they're not going to pursue some sort of triangle, but I don't want them to pursue some sort of triangle because Clyden is finally growing into the person that Bordas was hoping he would become, and I just want them to be happy. I don't want them to have to deal with another problem where they just got over all this other tough stuff.
I can see that. And I feel like, from my understanding of how the Orville does stuff, I don't feel like that's their vibe.
I don't think so either, but that's why in this moment, I don't know where they're going to go with it, obviously, but
Yeah.
in this moment, I'm fearing that triangle. And if they're not going to do the triangle, I don't know why you set it up at all.
That's why I think I'm so into it, because I'm so curious where it's going to go. And there's enough mystery there that I can't put together the pieces of what it means. And part of me thinks it's going to evolve into a really interesting discussion about something.
Maybe. I guess based on the setup, it could go somewhere that I'm not anticipating. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, that's true. But the two possible outcomes I see are two outcomes I would rather not explore.
Yeah, and I think the way that my brain works is I go to like 20 different places. And so I see all like the negative stuff, like, oh, they can't have it, they can't cheat, and, like, but then I also see like where else it could branch off to. And nothing technically happened.
No.
It's just like a little sparkle of like, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. And because sometimes the show like will let stuff marinate for a long time, so fingers crossed, episode, season 4, we might not ever hear about anything until season 4.
It's possible.
So they what I appreciate is this show does leave things and you're kind of like, oh, is that ever going to come up again? And then sometimes it does, like 6 episodes into the future in another season, you kind of get that resolution. So that's why I think I get excited about it, because I like what they do with that stuff. But I can understand where you're coming from. I thought the Dolly cameo was fun, and it was an interesting vehicle to use in the story. I was sad about Havina's decision to bring Topa in to this fold the way that she did. And I'm just going to say it. I sadly look at her with more of a cautious eye now. I just think it's hard. I know she arrived at like, I got to fix this. But like the forethought to know that that's not the way to do it is kind of what I was looking for. And the damage was kind of done by asking Topa. Because I thought about the whole, when you idolize somebody, you're just going to, you want to make them happy. You want to like, look, I'm showing up and I'm like, I want to be like you kind of thing. So that was just kind of disappointing, because maybe that's not the way Havina meant it. And she needed to kind of learn that that's what was happening, but it was still happened. And so that just kind of, it bummed me out a bit, if I'm being honest.
I get it.
But overall, the end of this episode was my big like star. Like, I feel like the last 10 minutes was the payoff I was hoping for. And it was just another visually beautiful episode with a lot of space porn that I enjoyed. So Rob, what is your takeaway from this episode?
I enjoyed this episode quite a bit. Despite it being the longest episode to date, I thought it was paced incredibly well and had just enough action throughout that anytime we were dealing with a lot of talking scenes, we get a nice action scene and that changes the pace a little. And then I was never bored going through this. It all felt like it flowed really well. Peter Macon and Adrian Palicki are once again great. We were complimenting them a lot during A Tale of Two Topas, and it feels like this is part of that story continuing, just in a different episode. Chad Coleman, despite being in this episode for only a short time, turns in one of his best performances on the show. I thought he was fantastic.
He was.
And having Rena Owen back as Havina is always a treat. Like, I had mentioned in a prior episode that I was happy to have her back in any form, really. She was just a simulation then, and I made a comment, something like, oh, I hope she comes back and we get to see her like Havina proper. So they did that. Like, we just continue to manifest things as we're going through this
what do we want to
season.
manifest?
I know, right? So it was really exciting to see her back again, because I absolutely love her character. And even though I had some of those same reservations as you did early in the episode, and there were parts where I was like, I don't know if she would have made these decisions, she did get some level of redemption by the end that made me feel okay. Like, she owned up to her mistakes. She realized them. Yes, she shouldn't have made them in the first place, but I also do understand that kind of tunnel vision to where you're not thinking about consequences and you're just thinking about what the opportunity in front of you is. Yes, you could say that Havina should be wiser than she acted in this episode, but I think it's okay to allow characters to make mistakes at times as long as they own up to them. And that doesn't completely redeem her, it doesn't keep her at the level she was at. But like you said, maybe that's also the point. Maybe it's a way of taking your idols down a peg and
Yeah.
understanding that they're just people too.
Yeah. It was a way to like, humanize is the wrong word because it's Mocklins,
Right, right.
But it is like that thing where over the seasons we've built Havina up to be like, oh, and so this shows a different side of Havina that you don't expect.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but it's also very real.
Like, Havina makes mistakes too.
And that's the thing that I think, like, even though I'm like disappointed in Havina, I like Rena Onan does an amazing job.
She's so good.
I just, it's a phenomenal character. And so sometimes in shows, you just want your favorite characters to always be like, oh, they're just so perfect all the time. And then when there's a reality kind of thrown at you, you're like, oh. And I think the Orville does a good job at doing that and not just making everything fanciful and perfect and, oh, you're heroes and they never do anything wrong and they're perfect all the time. And so I think it's a different approach to television that I'm used to seeing sometimes, because it's usually very like, they are only good or they are only bad. And so it brings up stuff you don't think about. Like, I didn't think Havina would make it. When she pulls Topa aside, I'm like, what is going on right now? Excuse me? But I knew there wasn't really any ill intent.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the difference is I still don't agree with it, but it did make me look at Havina differently. I'm a little bit wary of her, but I think that may have been the point.
I think it also hits a little harder with Havina because we've talked in the past about how none of these characters are portrayed as perfect. Yeah. So we never had like the beacon of wisdom and hope that Havina always was. That character doesn't exist in this show except for her. So when they take her down a peg, it's like, but that's the one we had.
Yeah. I liked the juxtaposition too of like Ed kind of being the voice of reason. Mm-hmm. And it just shows like, I think everybody has their moments of being the wisest person in the room.
Sure.
And I do enjoy that commentary because it's like fantasy thinking. You put the person on the pedestal and then sometimes they have to take a step down. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good reminder that at the end of the day, we all do make mistakes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're pretty huge ones.
I have seen that some people online, because people are already talking about the episode, are upset with the decision to depict a child being tortured. But I think it was necessary for the story. It would take something major for the Union to break ties with the Mocklins, given how much they generally bend over backwards for them, like we talked about. And we needed something strong enough to make Clyden's change of mindset believable, because he was so dead set on his culture and the way other Mocklins were that I don't know if I would have bought a change under any other circumstances. It had to be something extreme. And this does it. This is a new low for the Mocklins, one that inspires others to finally tolerate them no more.
I also feel like the Orville was on Fox for 2 seasons, and there's a lot of limitations. So they're on Hulu now, and my mindset is the show has grown up in ways that it could not before because of being, and when you're on cable television, you can't always do some of the things that you want to do.
Right.
And while they still have the same structure and the same bones and the same feel to the show, it's broaching stuff this season that is a lot more, deeper dive than I think the past couple seasons. And I can understand, like, it's upsetting to see those things. Like,
Yeah.
no one I was upset watching the Kalons get shocked in those episodes because
Same.
like it's what it represents.
Yes.
And I think that's what's so upsetting is like they're so clever with this show. Like when Isaac committed suicide in episode 1, it makes it more palatable because you're like, it's a robot.
Mm-hmm.
You're not actually seeing someone do that.
Right.
Watching someone deactivate themselves is very different. But I do feel like sometimes there's something to be said about showing those things because it evokes an emotion in you that is strong, and it can also help propel that story forward. Like you're saying, Clyde and Change of Heart,
Mm-hmm.
Union no longer being a part of the Union. Wait, the Mocklins no longer being a part of the Union. All this stuff is very delicate. I mean, I don't really know that there's a right answer for me to say about it, but I can see why the storytelling they're doing this season is a little different.
Yeah.
And like, listen, I mean, I used to watch Game of Thrones. Like that show was like hardcore.
Yeah.
And when you think about it in terms of like, they have more creative liberties now. The show is on Hulu. They can push the envelope in certain areas a little bit. But they're also trying to tell stories that make you feel something and make you want to root for these characters and also make you think. And I think that that's what these episodes are doing.
And when they put something on screen that's uncomfortable to watch, it's because they want you to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. It's like in the last episode too, where the K1 shot the kids.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't show it.
Right.
It's just they showed enough of Topa's stuff. I don't think that they overdid it.
Agreed.
So that's where my brain lands with it. I can understand why people might be like, wow, why would they show that? But I also, in the story that they told, if you look at the whole episode, it makes sense. And I personally don't feel like it was over the top.
Nor I. Yeah.
The Bortus beating the crap out of Garkle, that was intense.
That was way more violent than Topa being attacked.
That's the most violence I feel like, because he's stuck like that.
Yeah.
Krill pain stick into his eye.
Yeah.
It's also, I don't know, these stories are meant to make you feel something. And I think that's exactly what it was successful in doing.
Yeah.
If you're upset about that. I mean.
Lastly, 2 interesting thoughts moving forward. One is very much in line with what you had said already, is that the Union has been losing allies as the season goes on. First it was the Krill, now it's the Mocklins. And I am bracing for the inevitable Kalon War and curious to see how all parties will act when it actually happens.
It'll just be a big picnic at the end.
Sure.
Everyone's going to bring sides and it'll be fine. Maybe Timus will get to them before.
Maybe.
And everyone will get an emotion chip and it'll be fine.
The other thing moving forward is that we've talked repeatedly about them dropping things in on purpose for something in the future, and they rarely do that by accident.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I found very interesting about this episode is, as much importance as they put on it, they never named the Mockless contact.
I noticed that as well. In my brain, Mark and I were like, is it Clyden? Like, and I'm like, no,
I had that thought
Clyden.
too.
Yeah. So we were just like talking like, oh, is it? Yeah. And I think by the end of the episode, so much had happened that I think it kind of fell out of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But that is very true. They never mentioned who the contact might be.
I'm very interested to see who it will be, because I feel like it's going to come back up. And if we're thinking about Mocklins that we know by name, if it's not just someone new, which I can't imagine, the only other thought that comes to mind is Lokar.
I've been thinking about Lokar a lot this season for some reason. Maybe we're going to manifest Lokar showing back up.
Oh, man.
Gotta think about what I want to manifest in this season so that it can just happen the last 2 episodes. There's a lot. There's a lot I want to manifest.
Before we get out of here, we have one more thing to do because Katie's husband, Mark, is also a big fan of the Orville and always leaves us with his one sentence review.
It's really cool to see that the common tradition of Dolly Parton shrines in everyone's house has carried on through the centuries.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. This is just a segment of the full podcast that Rob and I do. So if you want to hear more of our thoughts and full episode discussions, go to thegeekgeneration.com/quantum drive.